Hello and welcome to the Avenue Church Online. We're so glad that you've joined us today. If this is your very first time joining us, we want to say especially welcome to you. The Avenue Church strives to empower people to take their next step towards Christ, and we hope that joining us online leads you to taking that step towards Christ. We also want to say welcome to those of you who are joining us from the Avenue Church at home. Last week, we started a new idea, a new wave throughout our church of joining other believers from the Avenue Church in your home and starting house churches all across our community. So if you're joining us from the Avenue Church at home, we want to say welcome to you today as well. As we move into a time of worship, today is going to be somewhat of a reflective and heavy day. And so we just want to prepare ourselves to take a deep breath, to be open to where God wants to lead us today through the conversation and through worship. As our pastor leads us today, we just want to welcome you to be open to how God is leading you to be the change in the world, to be the light in the world. And so thank you for joining us. Let's continue to worship.
We've seen what you can do, oh God of wonders. Your power has no end. The things you've done before, in greater measure, you will do again. 'Cause there's no prison wall you can't break through, no mountain you can't move. All things are possible. There's no broken body you can raise, no soul that you can't save. All things are possible. Darkest night, you can light it up. Light it up, oh God of revival. Let hope arise. Death is overcome. You've already won, oh God of revival. You rose in victory. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I found. Was blind, but now I see. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Welcome home, the sinner now is saved. The God who died came back to life, and everything is changed. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Oh, death, where is your stand? Oh, fear, where is your power? The mighty King of Kings has decided to deliver and redeem eternal life and time. Oh, praise His name forever. Hallelujah. Christ is risen. Is risen from the grave, and all throughout eternity, our song will be the same. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Day you called me in to heaven's sweet embrace. I see your skies, your open arms, the beauty of your face. And through tears of joy I lift my voice in everlasting praise. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Oh, your stand, oh fear, where is your power? The mighty King of Kings has decided to deliver and redeem. Eternal life is ours. Oh, praise His name forever. Hallelujah. Christ is risen. Risen from the grave. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. And all throughout eternity, our song will be the same. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave. And all throughout eternity, our soul will be the same. Hallelujah. Christ is risen from the grave.
Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. And he's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Yes, we live. Jesus, the name above every other. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. You're holy, holy. There is no one like you. There is none upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
Thank you for joining us at the Avenue at Home. We are gathered together today. The crowd looks a little different than it normally does. Don't have my staff here. I've invited some young men to come and be a part of this audience today, and many of them grew up in this church, and so you probably recognize some of them that grew up here, and I just appreciate all of you being here. I really do. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be addressing something that I needed some help on. I needed some help. With all of the protests that have been going on, the death of several black men and women have prompted some changes, hopefully, in the way we do things. The death of George Floyd has opened up a new dialogue for us. People are in the streets, protesting, angry, hurting. As a white pastor, it's hard for me to understand what exactly is going on, but as a Christian man, it is my job to hurt with those who hurt, to weep with those who weep, and to try to understand. And so what I have tried to do, and the reason I didn't talk about this in the weeks before, is I've tried to listen before I speak. But now it's my turn to speak. Now it's my turn to talk. The church has been silent, the white church has been silent way too long. And we've stuck our head in the sand. The tradition that we grew up in this church started very poorly. Our denomination started because the Northern Baptists wouldn't send slave owners as missionaries. So that's where the denomination of Southern Baptists began. That's not a good beginning at all. Now, thankfully, God worked through that, and there's been changes made throughout the years, but we started poorly. And I have to be honest, guys, I was born, and I wasn't born in East Texas, but I was raised in East Texas, and I was raised a racist. I was. And my mom and dad were good people, and they would never think that they were racist, but they were. The N-word was used in my house very regularly. Jokes were told that were inappropriate. I had a best friend that was Hispanic growing up, and we hit junior high. And about the 7th, 8th grade year, I noticed he had a little sister that was really good looking. And both sets of parents got together and decided we couldn't be friends anymore because they were afraid that I might start dating a Hispanic girl as I got older. So I was raised racist. When we integrated schools, Palestine was one of the last ones to integrate. I was in the 2nd grade. And we integrated, but we didn't. Because on the bus, one group sat in the front, one group sat in the back. At the lunch tables, one group sat at one table, the other group sat at the other table. It wasn't until I started playing sports and we started hanging out together and having something in common that I began to understand and became friends with several people of color. One of my best friends in high school really broke some boundaries for me, and he's the funniest guy I'd ever met. And I love the guy like a brother. And I remember I knew somehow instinctively that even though I loved him like a brother, he could never come over and spend the night. Now, my little brother, he didn't understand that. And so when he was like in the 4th or 5th grade, he had a good friend that was black, and he asked my parents, can so-and-so come over and spend the night? And I remember my dad just going, oh, no, there's no way, there's no way. And I remember thinking, why not? What is that? What's going on there? As I become a Christ follower, Jesus began to try to change my life. And I started looking in the mirror and realizing that this racism was a sin. Now, I want you to know we all have some form of racism. We really do. We're all born in that because we're born in that sin. And we have to really, all of us, work on those stereotypes and things that we think, if we're called men of God and women of God, if we're truly a follower, we got to let Jesus look at our heart and we'll see some things. Now, racism is not just an American problem. Racism is everywhere. Now, the great thing about living in America, guys, is we're actually trying to face it. We haven't done a great job, but at least we're having the discussion. And it's been a long process, I know, and it's not going fast enough. I was reading an article by Martin Luther King, and he said, justice delayed is justice denied. And so with the recent things, I've been really listening to that. And part of my racism in the past has been, but we're doing so much better. We're doing so much better. You know, this church, for a matter of fact, we have several different cultures that come together on Sunday, and we all worship together, and there's, you know, we don't feel that, but it's still, there's still a lot of work to do. And so as a white pastor, I want to speak into that. So I ask you to be here today because I don't understand what it's like to be black in the United States. I know I have a black son who, when he walks into Walmart, an employee follows him around. When he walks out, they check his bag. I don't go to Walmart a lot, but nobody ever follows me around. And the only thing I get when I walk out the doors of Walmart is a wave. That bothers me. I have two white sons that began driving. When my black son started driving, I felt like I had to have a conversation with him about how to act if he got pulled over. And he's been pulled over for a lot of things that my other two kids have never been pulled over for. And this is not about the police. I'm not bashing the police. I think we have to have good police officers, and this church is full of good police officers. What I'm afraid of is we're going to run the good officers out, and all we're going to have left are the bad ones. And so that's not about bashing the police. It's just about a problem in our society and in our nation, and the problem is not anything but sin. We've got to learn to see each other differently, and we will not be there until white people can look at you men and not be afraid. Not be afraid. And you can look at police officers when you get pulled over and not be afraid. Then we know we're in the right situation and we're in the right place. I want us to see each other. Now, I've heard people say, well, we need to be colorblind. Well, that's a little impossible. God's not colorblind. God made all of us different for a reason. And we celebrate that. I celebrate the differences. I mentioned to you earlier with Malachi, I tried to help him understand the black culture as much as I could. I tried to bring black men into his life to help him understand, you know, his history from that standpoint. Now, what I gave this young man is a spiritual heritage. And so I'm glad that I raised him because he's a man of God. And I'm glad of that. And I think he's going to be part of the change. And I think all of you guys in this room can be part of that change. And so, as I preach this sermon, I realize there's going to be a lot of people upset. So I pastor a mostly white church. And people are going to be upset. Some people are going to leave. They're going to say, oh, well, our pastor's gotten political, or our pastor's gotten liberal. But I'm not doing anything except trying to represent Jesus in a world that desperately needs him. All I'm doing is preaching the gospel, folks. The gospel has a social aspect to it. The gospel believes in reconciling all kinds of people. In Ephesians, this is the verse. Listen to what it says. But now in Christ Jesus, you who are far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who made both groups one and tore down the dividing wall of hostility. In his flesh, he made of no effect the law consisting of commands and expressed in regulations, so that he might create in himself one new man from two, resulting in peace. That's the gospel. So when I speak the gospel and I preach the gospel, that means this hostility, the dividing wall, has to be torn down. And I don't care what color you are. We are children of God, born into God, and we become brothers and sisters. Race plays a very small part of that. Listen, reconciliation with God and one another isn't a pipe dream. It was purchased by the blood of Christ. So this church is going to keep preaching Jesus. And when we preach Jesus, we need to understand that his commands was to love one another. And we got to love one another. But he also says we got to grieve together. When a person loses his or her life, we grieve together. In Romans 12:15, it says, weep with those who weep. Now, for us white folks, we will never understand the pain of our neighbors of color. And whether we agree or not with the solutions to the problem or not, we can't let our hearts grow hard and the pain and suffering racism continues to inflict on our Christian brothers and sisters. We've got to weep with them. We don't let them cry alone, whether they're black or white or Christian or Muslim, rich or poor. We weep with people who are weeping, and this is how we do it. We enter the room and we take a seat and we listen. We just listen. And we should listen more and speak less. James put it this way, my dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. I'll never understand what it is to be a black man or woman in this culture. But I will listen. I'm not going to jump to platitudes. I'm not going to make excuses. I just want to listen. So I want to ask a question and have a couple of you answer. What does a church like the Avenue, what can we do to help take this dividing wall of hostility down? What can our church do to be better?
I know one of the most direct ways that the Avenue can kind of help in the community is that you can stop making the problem about something else. You know, in the community on Facebook, Twitter, social media, whatever, I've seen people arguing with each other like, oh, this is the Democrats' fault, or oh, this is the Republicans' fault. Basically trying to make it not about injustice, but more about politics and things that can help but won't solve the problem. And it makes me upset because there are good people on both sides, yet they want to argue with each other and point fingers just because of their political party, instead of focusing on the actual injustice or the actual sin that's being done. And so that's one of the ways I feel like the Avenue can help.
Thank you.
Another way that we can change, the Avenue can change, is coming with a listening ear and an understanding heart. And go back to the base or the mission, how it was 5 years ago when I was a youth here at the Avenue Church. When I was coming, is when y'all was reaching out to the community and y'all was more for a community church. We have a lot of people, like you said, we are predominantly white church here in the Ellis County. So therefore, if people show actions that is greater for change, that is going towards change, then maybe people will look into it and maybe adopt that thing as well. Because we do have some people who believe that change will never come, change will never arrive, but that is not the case. But this is not just a black person's problem. This is everybody's problem. This is because we need everybody to act together on one accord to get the goal achieved. We need everybody to believe, because with belief comes behavior. Because it's just like, for example, for a football player, if someone who wants to go, if your goal is to get to the NFL, if they believe that they're going to make it to the NFL one day, their behavior is going to align with that by saying that they're going to go and work out twice a day, or they're going to wake up they're going to put that extra work in regardless to get to their ultimate goal. So what I'm saying is that if we believe that if we're preaching on that change is about to come, our behaviors need to align with that as well.
That's good. Good. Anybody else want to say anything?
I just think for the most part, it's more about standing with us and for us and supporting us the best way you know how. I don't ask for you to post on social media. I don't ask for you to go and feel uncomfortable, but I do ask you to go and be uncomfortable, because now is the time, after years and years of standing back and supporting us behind closed doors, I just want people to come to the forefront and stand in front of us and with us and help us get the same rights as everyone else, because God literally died and rose on the third day, so we all have the same, we sin the same, and God forgives us every morning for that. So just ride with us and go with us through this ride. And for that, I will say thank you for whoever decides to do so.
Thank you. Any others before we go?
I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. I think it's changing our perspective on a lot of things. I remember in football we learned how to empathize with others and placing each other in each other's shoes. And I just want to know, like, if would it be different if it was switched, basically. So
That's excellent.
I would just say, just try to be active in the community. There's, for example, like the other day, we had a kickball tournament, and mostly every team was black except one. So, I mean, just things like that. Just if we're one community, we should act like it. It shouldn't be an east side. Everybody should be able to go wherever they want to. So stuff like that, just be active, just support.
Thank you. Thank you. This is my commitment. My commitment, number one, I've already mentioned, is to listen before we speak, to be quiet, to empathize, to try to understand. But then I want us to take it a step further, because I think, like you said, we have supported behind the closed door. We've had these conversations. Many of you grew up with Chase, my son. We talk about this all the time. You know, we read books, we watch documentaries, we try to understand as best we can, but we've done it behind closed doors. And so the Bible tells us we need to do what we can do. In Proverbs 3:27, when it's in your power, don't withhold good from the one to whom it belongs. Don't withhold good. The parable of the Good Samaritan, the guys that passed by could have done good, but they didn't. I don't want the avenue to pass by and not do what we can do. With that, in Proverbs it says, speak up for those who have no voice, for the justice of all who are dispossessed. Speak up, judge righteously, and defend the cause of the oppressed and the needy. That's our job, and that's what we want to do. Now, for many of us, we need to look in the mirror instead of the monitors, instead of watching TV, instead of looking at reports and listening and getting our news from Facebook and Twitter. We need to look in the mirror and check our hearts. Do we have the sin of racism in our life? Because it is sin. If we are judging people based on the color of their skin or on a stereotype, it is sin, and being a racist is a sin. So look at your life. When you look at your life, you have to ask, how do other people see you? How do other people see you? Do you have friendships with people of other races? Not that you know the name of somebody or have had somebody in your home once. Do you have real relationships, friendships with people of color, with other people? Do you have that kind of relationship? That's what's important. Do you have them as friends? Have you built relationships? That's the only way. Folks, we get rid of racism when we get to know the person. Color disappears when we know the person. How do people see you? Now, whether you like it or not, if you got a Confederate flag flying in your pickup truck, you're going to tell me it's history. But it's more than history. It's not pride. It's oppression. And it means something. We have to be responsible. If we're Christians, if we're followers, I am responsible for how you see me. Because I can't speak into your life if I don't. So some of us need to look in the mirror. Do you tolerate racist jokes? I mean, listen, it's not enough anymore in our day and time to not be racist. We've got to be anti-racist. If I see someone beating a child, I'm not a child abuser. If I see somebody beating a child, you know what? I'm going to stop it. I'm not a racist. But I need to step over the line, and if I see somebody being racist, I need to stop it. When I hear a joke that somebody thinks is funny that's racist, I need to call them out just as I would if they used God's name in vain. I've got to be an anti-racist. We all do. And I want to tell you something. I think we're on the verge of something. I really do. And in the 60s, I hope that I would have been on the right side of that movement. I guarantee you in this movement, I've got to be on the right side because I know which side God's on. And I want us to step up and be better. Can I pray with you guys? Father, thank you for the opportunity to speak the truth. Father, I hope that I've spoke the truth in love. God, I just pray that we will be better, that everyone listening to this, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, from every culture, everyone listening will look in the mirror and say, God, forgive me for the racist thoughts that I have. And help me to see people the way you see people. Help me to love people the way you love people. Father, help us to love one another in such a way that real change happens and the church leads it and doesn't stick our head in the sand. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Once again, thank you for joining us online today. Your presence with us during this time has been so meaningful. We hope today's message touched you. It challenged you to be the light in the world. If you have questions or want more info, send us an email at info@theavenuechurch.com. And no matter which campus you attend, maybe you're in Ennis or Waxahachie or somewhere else, if you are looking for a place to give, you can text Avenue Give to 77977, or you can do it from the website, theavenuechurch.com/give. Once again, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next week.